It's my.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. It's my pleasure to share expertise with you. Actually, today's substance is just introductory, things about Taiwan's urban system. It's not highly related to my current research, but in order to know Taiwan's city or urbanization process, you need to know, some general stuff. So that's what I want to share with you today. And it's really tough to talk about, this kind of stuff in the early morning because everybody are not awake, even myself. And sometimes for this kind of, it's still an introduction of myself. Okay. Actually, to know cities, you have to build a connection with it. But today, because Nora kind of gave me a job, is to give an overall introduction for the urban development. So I will try my best to give you some impression about Taiwan's urban system and urbanization process. But during the process, during the class, I still wish I can bring some stuff for you to know more about Taiwan City. So today we are going to, we have 4 parts for the lecture. First, I will give a brief introduction, on Taiwan's urbanization process and development of urban system, just a general sketch. And then we have to know what's the process or what's the factors that contributed to this kind of urbanization patterns. And I think 2 things will be important to know. One is the relationship between the urbanization process with the Taiwan's economic development. And the second part is how does that relate to transportation, the development of transportation system. And the third part, I will focus on 3 major metropolitan regions and to give you some in-depth idea about the urban development. But I'm not sure whether I will have enough time on that part. Actually, that part is more related to my current research. And you will, in your daily life, you will get more chances to know that. But in order to know the current cities, I think we need some kind of historical sense of view to know, the appearance or the landscape that every day that you will encounter those urban or those cityscape. And maybe if we have some more time, we can discuss a little more in depth. But questions are welcome during my presentation. Okay. It's noise in the morning. I quickly look at last week's PowerPoint from Professor Nora's presentation, and I know that she already gave you some introduction about Taiwan's geography. But for international students, I would like to ask you, not local students, which name of a city will come into your, mind or brain whenever you think about Taiwan City? You are in Taipei, definitely, right? So, name several cities that you have impression.
We have from the northeast, we have Yilan, Hualien, Taiwan, and then southeast is Pingdong, and then go up to the Kaohsiung, Hainan, Jiayi, then Taichung, then Hsinchu, Taoyuan, and similarly.
Okay, great. And then he will get 80 points, if we have a test for the name of the city. But what I'm asking, is no matter the name that will come into your mind, have you ever think why are those cities showing on the map for a nation, or for a region? Have any of you thought about that? Whenever you name some cities, have you ever think of why are those named? Anybody have thought about that kind of question? Such as when you say Ilan, it's just a name, or some pictures will come into your brain, and some substance or some elements will come out. Okay.
Yeah, I've been overseas by dimension, so I when I say each, I remember each memory that happened.
That's great. Okay, that's great. So that is what I suggest, that you need to have some kind of starting point to know city, and you have to try to build up connections with the substance that I'm going to talk about today. We don't have a good environment today for the lecture. And actually, I try to look at the lecture series of this class. I feel so sorry that this year you don't have a lecture to talk about the general physical environment about Taiwan. Actually, the city system or urban system of Taiwan is highly related. It's also highly related to the physical environment. Even though I just try to focus more on, how does that relate to economic development and transportation development, but that is really, highly related to the physical environment, and I will try to, focus that for a little bit. Okay, and you already know the administrative, areas of Taiwan. And the first part, I would try to give you a general description about the city from the historical point of view. And for most of the, no matter a Chinese student, a local student, or international student, I understand, talk about history, is the part that is not easy for you to think of or to build a connection. But is anybody want to, give us some kind of opinion about when we talk about city, why we need to know history of it, or how history is important, or how city matters to cityscape, or to in general to urban development? I want to share some opinion from you, and then I will know, what do you know most, or what you are interested in. Why history is important to cityscape? Why? For example, you are starting in NTU, in Taida. You know the layout of Taida, right? But what's the history of Taida, related to the current campus gap? And do you care about it? If you don't care about it, no history is nothing. It's not important at all. Why we need to know the history, and how does that relate to the landscape? Or maybe I can ask another question, especially for international students. You are studying in this campus. Have you ever spent some more time to know the history of Taida, and how does that relate to your everyday lives? And how does it relate to the daily route that you pass through? Yes?
I'm a civil engineering student, and I know that I care about structure. So I know that all the structure is the Japanese style, especially the main street in Dada.
Yes.
It's built by Japanese infra.
Okay.
still the same, almost the same, like the same look
Yes.
at that time.
Okay.
So it looks like almost Japanese school. I know where it's at.
Okay. So if you get a chance to visit Tokyo University, you will feel it's pretty similar from this campus with that. So you will understand that the general layout was funded in Japanese era or Japanese occupation for this university. But for this quarter, now our classroom is located. You feel nothing about the Japanese, era, right? It's built in a modernization period. So it's the same. When we look at a city, you have to read the structure and the texture of it. Cityscape are like the layers of sediments. So it was funded by different periods of construction. So and it built up the form of the city and even though the structure of the city. And that kind of a viewpoint is very professional, but for general public, such as if you are a tourist to a city, usually where would you go to a city? Or the tourist guide, what the tourist guide will most highlight the city usually are the historical legacies, and some are historical landmarks. So which is to say the story of this city, to tell about the difference of this city from others. You will go to Taipei 101, but you will see skyscraper all over the world, even though now it's the highest. That is, the name of the highest that bring you there. But when you go there, most of things are similar to, what you will see in other global cities. So usually what you would like to know more or to know the difference of this city from others are rooted in their histories. Okay. And for Taiwan city, it's the same. We have to, look at from the historical viewpoint to know what the process that construct the texture of the city or the layers of the landscape for a city. So definitely from a tourist guide, you will learn for Taiwan's ancient city or old city, we always bring about three cities. 一府二路山艋甲. Fu means Tainan Fu. Lu means Lugang. I think most of you know this. And Mengjia is the Wanhua, the old temple where most of the old temples are located in Taipei City. But why is that? And why these old cities, roses in the old period of Taiwan? What kind of characters are those cities? What are their locations? And what makes their rise and fall? What's the reason that they rose? And what the reason that they declined is also important for a city. So for these three old ancient cities, do any of you know what's their characteristics? I bring up, some pictures here which have some meanings. The first you will see, does anybody know what's that? Local student can also, answer question as well.
是安平港吗？
Yeah? So what's that?
郑成功和荷兰人。
Speak in English.
不知道。
Okay.
The famous Koxinga and fought with the Duchess in the Tainan harbor.
If we talk about Taiwan city, because Taiwan is an island, usually the city is densely populated area. It's grown, with usually go with its connection with other part of the world. It is used as the node to build connections. So for Taiwan, in mid-century, especially in the 17th century, the Dutch area tried to use Taiwan as a node to build up their connection to the Pacific Ocean. So they tried to occupy Taiwan, and then Tainan is the most important location. So they built up a fortress. So it's a military site, but military site go first, and then when they have a military, they occupy the area. They use the military force to control this area, and then the commerce, the trade will follow up. So in the ancient time, most of the city you will see the fortress or the wall city. So no matter in Taipei or Hsinchu or Tainan, even though some of the landscape you cannot see, but the fortress and wall cities are most important landscape for the Asian cities. And in addition to the military landscape, commerce landscape, and for the general public, which means that for the citizens or for the city residents, during for their daily lives, the most important things is the religion. So temple. So whenever you go to Wanhua or you go to Tainan, definitely the most important historical sites are temples. So you definitely will go to, temple. And for example, last month I hosted a professor from I graduated from U of Minnesota, and there's a professor just visit us, and then we took him to the Longshan Temple, and then because there are different kind of guards. One of the guards is in charge of the examination or the scholar academia activities, and he also learned to worship. And then after he came back, he sent us a message, said that he got a huge grant from the National Science Foundation. Even though it's a joke, but which means that religion center play a very important part in city life for the general public, for the citizens. So even though for Longshan Temple is more than the history of it is more than hundreds, so still it play a very important part for people's lives. Such as my mother-in-law, every month she goes there to worship, to ask for the health for the family. And based on that, so many of the city activities will centers on those temple, and then build up the structure of the city. So if we look at the old part of Taipei, you will go to look at the Mengjia, Dadaocheng, and we call it the inner city, the Chengnei. So this is, can anybody name the name of this street? Anybody knows that? If you, I forgot to bring Taipei's map. If you get a map of Taipei, if you can read the texture of the city from the map, you will quickly recognize where are those words.
Shenzhou district.
Yes, Shenzhou district. That's right. But I mean, what are the name of this street? So in the north, anybody knows the name of it? Huh? No.
North Gate.
North Gate is here. So this is Zhongxiao Road. And this is Zhongshan South and North Road, Zhongshan Road. And this is Zhonghua Road. And these are the Aiguo Xilu and Aiguo Donglu. So those streets, I think you all know of it and heard of it. Even sometimes you pass through of it, but you never think of, go back to 100 or 200 years ago. They are world cities of Taipei. And if you go to 爱国西路, is there anybody come from Taipei? No, nobody. I'm a local student. Nobody come from Taipei. Give you a hint. This once I bike to, because I live in Jintian Road near Yongkang Street. Anybody know Yongkang Street? There are a lot of gourmets there, so it's not far away from here. It's near Sida and Taida, Yongkang Street, near Xinyi Road. So you definitely will visit there. Or Sida Yesi, you all know the night market, right? Do you know Sida night market? Yes. So it's also a very important tourist site in the southern part of Taipei. And Yongkang Road is not far away from the Sida night market. And this once I went to somewhere near this place. That's the headquarters for Taiwan's post office. And I found, the stone was still there. It's very beautiful. And the stone come from Yangming Mountain. Because they use in Qing Dynasty, they use the local material from Yangming Mountain. It's a volcanic, because Yangming Mountain is a volcanic mountain. So the stone is quite hard. So they use the local material from Yangming Mountain, Anshan to build up the wall. So you still can find some, residues. Maybe we call it residues. But whenever you look at that stone, stand in the corner of a city, you will think of, the history of the city. So those kind of residual sites, from the point of view of today's, urban development, you will know more about the city, and you will think of the importance of historical preservation. Right? It seems no. So what I mean that whenever in the city you will find something, some elements, but if you don't think of the history of culture, those things are nothing, meaningless to you. And if that's the case, the city will be all the same all over the world. So no matter you go to Taipei, you go to Hong Kong, Shanghai, it's all the same. It's nothing different. So what makes city important is the difference. So we have to look at the elements of difference. So the rest of the class, you also will talk about the ecological diversification, cultural diversification, and the importance of it. So it's the same for cityscape. We also have to look at the cultural diversification and cultural elements or historical elements. So this means that just try to give you some hint. You will look at some of the cityscape, cities or urban elements to look through the history of the city. And one other thing is, for the old cities, they are all located at the seaport or river port, which means that cities are used as a node for trade, for commerce, or trading or exchange activities. And this picture actually is just to let you know that in the imperial Chinese rule, going back to 400 years ago to 100 years ago, the major city center are these three cities in Taiwan. And actually, most of the Taiwan's current cities, they were founded in the Japanese rule, in Japanese era. And during this period, the importance of it is that it's a process of modernization. Even though in the late Qing dynasty, the last Qing governor, he already built up the railroad, the electronic light for some major Taiwan cities, but that is only spotted in spotted area, not for the whole system. So started from Japanese rule. Japanese tried to, because Taiwan was a showcase for Japanese occupation. Japanese started their modernization process in the late 19th century. So they also would like to build up Taiwan as a showcase as their colony. So in addition to Tokyo, Taipei was the second city that Japanese funded the modern urban planning on it. So in Taipei, you will see especially in the inner city area, the road system is the rectangular. It's rectangular the road system. So if you name the road of Taipei, you will definitely name it 忠孝仁爱信义和平, right? So that is, and then for the vertical, started from 信义 Road is 基隆 Road, 复兴 复兴 that's right. 光复敦化复兴建国 and then 新生. So which means that whenever you go to, some modern cities, most of the inner city are rectangular road system, which means that it has been imposed the modernized mechanism, which is urban planning on it. So this kind of road system is a way of efficient. This kind of road is built up for cars, not for pedestrian. So why we call this a symbol for modernization is because this is an infrastructure to promote the modern, especially for the development of modern or industrial development. And because for Taipei, I just mentioned that Japanese government uses as the window as a colony to build up a modern city. So the urban planning has been imposed on. So we can look at now in Taipei's landscape. In Taipei, the inner city, in the most central of the city, what kind of landmark building that will come into your mind? In the inner city of Taipei, you are staying in Taipei. So if you look at the skyline, which building will come into your mind? Taipei 101. You will see it because it's the highest. And then, what's the second highest building of Taipei? Xinguang Tower. Okay, those are all modern office buildings. But for old buildings, you will look at our presidential hall, right? So the presidential hall was built up in Japanese era. So it was, it's a Baroque, style building. So which is also a symbol for Japanese westernization process, which means that it's westernization in that time, in 19th century, is equivalent to the modernization process. So in the, we call it 博爱特区, you will see the presidential hall, you will see the Taipei Bingguan, the guest house, everything, all are related to Japanese legacy. So it's still, left there. In this week, there's important news in Taiwan's newspaper. It's talking about to relocate the presidential hall because the Taipei city government, when our president was a mayor, he issued some of the building license to some kind of developers, and those buildings are now very high nearby the presidential hall, and also nearby the president's residence. So the Ministry of Defense are worried about the security of my presidents, but which means that in the very inner city, because the land price is very high, so many of the developer or real estate try to build up luxury buildings there. So 一品院, if you know that, very high building, and every flat is equivalent to 1亿台币, 1亿 100 million NTD for a flat nearby the presidential hall, the luxury apartment buildings. So there is some kind of debates about whether we should, keep our administrative district in the very center of the city, or for the new development, we'd better relocate the presidential hall, or even though some of the central administrative, activities, to outer cities. So if that go into your mind, what will be your opinion? Should we relocate those kind of historical sites? Now, definitely the activity are the administrative for the central government. So should we relocate those, activities, away from the very inner city to outer quarter? Should we? Yeah, just. Yes, started from the Japanese era is the government of the general government work there, and the residence is also there. And then when KMT came here, I remember last talk, Professor Nora Chiang mentioned that to you, right, about the retreat of the KMT regime from the mainland China, and then came to Taiwan. So the former president Jiang Jieshi, used that as the presidential hall. So it's last until now. So it almost 100 years that the highest leader of Taiwan worked there and live nearby. But compared to the current, if you think about the current city development, some people would like to kind of move those kind of historical legacy away. Definitely, move out the administrative activity doesn't mean that we have to tear down those buildings. Those buildings can be, uses other kind of uses, definitely. And the reason that people kind of think of to remove the presidential hall away, one is related to the security of the president. And the other thing is, they kind of mentioned that, I read from the newspaper, that, the former president, Chen Shui-bian, when Chen Shui-bian worked there, there's quite a lot of mouse. So which means that old historical buildings, you have to spend a lot of money to maintain it, to preserve it. Such as for NTU, we are, because we are from the Japanese era. In the past, we are Japanese university. So nearby the university, we have quite a lot of Japanese-style housing. It's faculty housing right now. And some of the building was, assigned by the city government as historical building. But Taida NTU say, I have no money to preserve those buildings. And city government just assigned it as a historical building, and they say that to preserve it is your business. My duty is just to assign, these are historical building, you cannot be, torn it down. And Taida said, okay, I reserve it, but most of my budget have to use as education, not to preserve the buildings. So, what will going for those buildings? It will just deteriorate it. and then those buildings are run down. And actually, if you walk through or bike, around this district near Taida or Shida, you will see quite a lot of the flat, the Japanese-style buildings, and usually they are quite a lot of trees. So those kind of areas nowadays are the green emerald for the city, because the culture and even though ecological assets or ecological diversification has been preserved on those areas, such as my faculty building, even though it's apartment, but in front of my building there are two historical buildings, and quite a lot of trees are over 100 years. And every morning I wake up like in the forest. You will listen to the bird sound. So for city, especially for ancient city, because they are heavily, built and densely populated, so the physical or ecological assets are very important. And those cultural assets usually go with ecological assets for the city. So to preserve those things is very important for the city. So the area that I mentioned is nearby the Da'an Park, the largest park of Taipei. We call it the Central Park of Taipei, such as the Central Park of New York. And for Da'an Park, it actually is just right here, somewhere here. So if you look at Taipei's green parks, usually the largest park were planned in this, urban planning map. So if you go to Jinhua Jiudian, does anybody know where Jinhua Jiudian is? It's nearby the Zhongshan Beilu. So nearby the Jinhua Jiudian, there are two parks. So we name it number 14, number 15. And then in front of Longshan Temple, there's a park. It's number 12. So, and for Da'an Park, it's number 7 park. So which means that in Japanese era, the urban planning, they use urban planning. They already know that down in the city, we have to plan for some green area. So quite a lot of large, land was preserved as a park. So now the layout for the urban planning really influenced the current texture or current structure of the cities. So these are related to Taipei. For this, if you go to Tainan, are there any local students from Tainan? No? Okay. For this picture, I want to show you that in Tainan, because Tainan was developed, go back to more than 400 years. But definitely the most prosperous eras go back to 200 years. And nearby the seaport, there are several canals there. And now if you go to that site, you will never see canals any longer. They are become, they're just highly, densely populated. So whenever you go to somewhere, if you know, go back to 100 years ago, 200 years ago, what's the scenery of that site, and then you will get a better sense how that area have been developed, and what kind of imagination or what kind of forces that you have to impose on to make those areas more attractive, rather than just leave it for the market forces. So if you go to each city, I would like to ask international students, what do you think is the most attractive scenery or attractive character for Taiwan City? compared to your country or compared to other cities you have ever been visited? Years ago, when we ask international scholars, their impression is ugly. They say, why Taipei was so ugly? Now, some of the city, some part of the city are, quite attractive and beautiful, but still, many of Taiwan's city or the cityscapes are still very ugly. Why's that?
So just ask why exactly?
No, I mean, sometimes some people definitely there are kind of a prejudice or different kind of value in terms of the beautiful or ugly. Definitely there are differences, but I mean in general, like 20 years ago, because at that time we haven't go to that part yet, but that time it's an industrial city for most of Taiwan city, so the city landscape are just not attractive or of all. We don't have to go to that. I'm asking you now, when you travel around the city, what will attract you, or what will impress you, or what will make you think of the goodness of Taiwan city compared to yours, or compared to other cities that you have been traveled? No? You are in Taipei. Okay. So because why I ask you this question is because now one of the important agenda is to build up a livable city and a sustainable city. And what is livable city? What is sustainable city? Which are, abstract concept. So we have to go to people's, perception. What do you think? What kind of city landscape? What kind of city activity will make you feel comfortable, livable? And usually for international students or international tourists, because when they, visit a city, what they will look at is use comparison. What's the difference that city makes? So that's why I would like to ask international students, what your impression about Taiwan city compared to other part of the world? And some people will say ugly, beautiful. Some will say it's hospitality, make you feel very comfortable. So different kind of words will come out, and then we will know what's make the perception of people for a city. And then
this summer I went visiting Seoul.
So
and I found that the government of Seoul paid much effort in preserving the historical sites, like the palace or the other historical buildings. And maybe just like you could zoom in, zoom out to compare Taipei and Seoul, but I still think the government of Taipei put less effort than Seoul in preserving the historical buildings. They put many signs or many they do other things to let foreigners, their visitors know their city well in modern aspect or in ancient aspect.
Okay. Actually, why I keep asking you this kind of question is because current run of urban development is cultural-led development. All over the world, many of the city governments use cultural policy to revitalize urban development, and use cultural activity or cultural-led development to create profits for the city. So, historical legacy is very important, not just for history's sake, it's also for current development's sake. So you will see, but if you don't have a deep understanding of the history, you will never know how to revitalize, how to regeneralize that, use that historical legacy as assets for city development. And to, maybe you will say, that is government's sake, not my sake, not my own business. But for your own business is how to build a livable city to you, to make your city life more livable, more attractive. Not just, for international tourists, but also for local residents. Okay. Okay, Nora, remind me that I have to give you some time to break. But I will just, end up with this slides. In addition to urban planning, city planning, one other important thing that will influence, cities' development is transportation, the development of transportation system. In Japanese era, because the major transportation layout was followed by the route of the railroad. And the railroad station, the station is the node for the city. And always the station is located in the very center of city. So in addition to the administrative building that we just mentioned before for Taipei, another important landmark in Japanese era is the railroad station. And in Taiwan now, only Taichung Railroad Station were still preserved. Taipei Railroad Station.
Railroad station is
Oh, really?
okay,
removed to other area. What I mean is that still, located in the real place they were in that time. And now, when you go to, for example, if you go to Kyoto, they have a new railroad station. And you go to Tokyo, they try to, combine the traditional building with the modern building together. So it's a hybridization kind of, construction. So we are very glad that, Taichung Railroad Station was not torn down before, because the architectural style is very beautiful. So if you get a chance to go to Taichung, do not forget to visit, Taichung Railroad Station. And you will see this kind of style. It's the same whenever you go to some major city in Japan. Because the modernization or westernization periods is pretty similar. So when you look at the very center or the landmark building for Taiwan, you will see also, the Japanese era in the Pacific regions. So which means that, I just try to remind you, you have to look at the urban planning system and also the transportation system. And those kind of two mechanisms were very important, were very important foundation for Taiwan's city's layout. Okay? Okay, let's take a break. 10 minutes. Okay?